Department already has these policies in place for all of these things. The tragic situation in Minneapolis and the incidents playing out across our nation should force all of us to look at our communities and ensure that the laws are being enforced fairly without regard to race or status. I know that we do that in Moscow, and we will continue to do so. Diversity is welcomed and enriches our community. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to open up public comment and mayor's response period. We always do this at the front of every council meeting that we have when the public is here, and we haven't done this for 3 months, so it's kind of nice to have. And we'll be taking, hearing from folks, as long as it's not on this evening's agenda or something that is in front of planning and zoning and or the Board of Adjustment. So with that, you're welcome to come up to the podium, state your name, and tell us what's on your mind.
Victoria Seaver, 121 North Lily. I didn't know you were going to have public comments, so this is off the cuff. Number one, we have an excellent police force, and I have all confidence in them, and I want to acknowledge that they do a great job for this town. We'd be lost without them. And I want to thank the council and the mayor and the businesses and the citizens and everybody who stepped up to the plate during the virus. You guys have had a huge job on your plate, and I think you've done it very well. And you're doing everything you can to help the small businesses and getting things back on track safely. So I want to acknowledge that too, and thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. It's always good to see you, and I knew down deep inside we'd see you as our first person here because you always come to council meetings, which I absolutely love. Okay. Are there others that would like to come up and speak? Gary?
Your Honor, I have an email that was sent by Dulcie Kirsting-Lark I'd like to read.
Okay.
It says, Dear Mayor Lambert and City Councilors, I won't be able to virtually attend tonight's regularly scheduled meeting, but I didn't want to forego an opportunity to commend the City of Moscow staff and volunteers on their efforts the last 2 weeks to offer our beloved farmers market to in-person shopping. The last 2 Saturdays, I both attended and observed the market and can't say enough about the professionalism of all who have made the event possible. Amanda Argona and her team were cheerful even when the weather was not, and pleasant even when fellow patrons were not. While I missed the opportunity to socialize this year, I'm very grateful that the city is still providing me with the chance to shop local and support the vendors I've developed relationships with over the past several years. I was disappointed to hear the rude and unfeeling comments directed at city staff and volunteers by would-be shoppers or other visitors to downtown who feel inconvenienced or annoyed by the safety protocols that have been put in place. Amanda and her team responded over and over again with graciousness and patience. No one deserves to be shouted at or called names simply for doing their job. As someone who works in the public sphere and has been on the receiving end of unkind words, I commend them all for their level-headedness. To all those who are making this year's market possible, including council members and Mayor Lambert, I extend my sincere thanks. I know the farmers market may be an integral part of Moscow's identity, but it is not a right, and so I am grateful to have access to it whenever capacity best preserves the health of our community. If there is an opportunity for this note to be shared during the public comment portion of tonight's meeting, I'd be happy to have it read aloud. With warm regards, Dulcie Kirsting-Lark.
Well, thank you very much, Dulcie, for those comments. And I was at the farmers market Saturday, and I was very pleased with what was going on. And, you know, ladies and gentlemen, our 2020 year is a very much a different year than any year we've experienced. And here in Moscow, we've had people with incredible patience, and none of us like to have to do what we're doing, but we're doing it, and we're doing that as a community, and that's the best thing we can do. And we're going to have to keep the good fight up for quite some time. But Amanda, for you and the team back there, I was pretty impressed with the farmers market on Saturday, as well as the pickup and delivery at this parking lot as well. I talked to the folks that were running that, and so I was very impressed. And it was a cold, brutal, wet Saturday. So, okay. Do we have anybody else that would like to make a public comment before we go on? Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item number 3, which is a public hearing. Howard Street right-of-way vacation. We got Bob Lavelle here that's doing the presentation. Good evening, Bob.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and fellow council members.
Just Bill, can I just say something? Is there a way, Zach, that we can use our screen to put that up in the middle of our screen? So we can see it?
The presentation?
Yes, we
Yes.
will be presenting it through Zoom.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to share.
Thank you.
Maureen and Ann, can you see that from Zoom?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
good.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, good. Go ahead. Carry on, Bob.
All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me as well?
Yes,
All right, great. Well, good evening. My name is Bob Bouvel. I work with the Civil Engineering Department here at the City of Moscow. I'm here to talk to you today about the right-of-way vacation for the north 600 block of Howard Street. For those who are not familiar where that is, this is kind of a vicinity map showing where that is. It's it's real close to that steep hill on E Street, just north of the St. Mary's School. This is a closer view of the subject right away. Again, this is, can you guys see my pointer when yeah, you can.
Yes.
Okay, good. This is E Street, this is the E Street Hill, and this is Polk Street heading up towards the city shop. And St. Mary's School is on D Street, about a block north of here. So the right-of-way that we're talking about is this portion of E Street. It was platted as part of the Homestead replat. And it's currently undeveloped. I'm not exactly sure why it never got developed back when the subdivision was built, but it was not, and we're in this situation today. So Neil Brown, who owns this property right here, petitioned the city of Moscow to vacate the right-of-way. The right-of-way by state law would revert back to the adjacent property owners that are along the right-of-way. So the right-of-way would essentially get split in half and given to the property owners on either side of the right-of-way. The long-term goal of the petitioners would be to do lot splits of their lots. Mr. Frazier on this side is looking to do something similar. And as that would happen, this portion of the right-of-way would go to Mr. Frazier. This portion of the right-of-way would go to Mr. Brown. This part of the right-of-way would go to Mr. Forseth, and this portion of the right-of-way would go to Mr. Paul. As Mr. Brown and Mr. Frazier are looking at doing similar developments, they have gotten together and have preliminarily negotiated an easement that would go across the vacated portion of Mr. Paul's right-of-way as for access to these new lots that they would create. So a little bit of history. We've been looking at trying to build a road through this stretch of right-of-way for quite a long time. This profile, which basically starts from the center line of E Street and goes to roughly the center line of Homestead, shows one potential layout for a proposed street that would go down the Howard Street right-of-way. This proposed profile is utilizing maximums within the constraints that we've put on ourselves for road building, and would create a situation where we would need to build a road that is roughly 15, almost 18 feet above the existing ground. This study that was done back in 1977, which gives you an idea of how long we've been looking at this, also looked at the potential of putting in a roundabout coming off of Homestead and ending roughly halfway through the block that would give access to the back end of those lots. This this roundabout wouldn't work today, given our current standards for roundabout design, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So, as we're considering this vacation, there's a couple things we need to look at. I'm going to apologize for the death by bullet point, but there are a lot of things to consider in this. So, by state law, if we do vacate the right-of-way, we have to prove that there's some sort of benefit to the general public. And the first two bullet points here kind of lay out the best argument for the benefit to the public. As you can see from my previous slides, if we were to vacate this right-of-way, it would allow for some infill development, which is kind of a goal within a lot of cities around as a way of kind of increasing housing and stuff like that without adding additional demand onto our resources. Another consideration is that this right-of-way is currently maintained by our streets department. So in that they have to do the weed control and other maintenance activities on this right-of-way. So if we were to get rid of this right-of-way, our streets department would no longer have to go out and do that maintenance. Some of the downsides would be we would lose the use of this right-of-way for future pathways, utility connections, and from the comments that we got in the emails, it's also a recreation site for children who like to go use the steep hill to go sledding. So that would be a potential loss. Another downside is there would be a slight increase to the traffic on Homestead. Homestead is currently a substandard road, which means it doesn't meet the current right-of-ways. Or the current standards for public roads. It's narrow. It isn't paved. It's gravel. So adding a little bit of additional traffic to a substandard road is a downside. Another thing to consider is the street construction. It would be expensive. Anybody who has to do it is going to have to spend a lot of money. They're going to have to bring in a lot of fill, and it'll require retaining walls, which are also expensive. In the current policy that we have, the city, without doing either an LID or possibly a grant, the city is pretty unlikely to ever build this road ourselves, and so that essentially shifts this requirement onto the adjacent property owners to build it, if we didn't. So what that means, so that kind of congruently, the flip side of that is in order to build that road, the retaining walls would be so high that it would essentially cut off access to the back end of those lots that have been asking for this right-of-way vacation. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. In order to split these lots and develop them, they'd be required to build the road, but if they build the road, they wouldn't be able to split their lots. So the next thing to talk about is the cul-de-sac option that was looked at in that 77 study was done using cul-de-sac standards back in 1977. Today's standards are our cul-de-sac standards today are stricter, they're larger. Our cul-de-sacs are larger nowadays. So those cul-de-sacs wouldn't fit within the existing right-of-way, and they would require so much additional right-of-way to be donated or dedicated that it also wouldn't make development of the back of those lots very feasible. Currently, right now, the city has no plans to utilize this right-of-way for any utility expansion for either sewer or water. There is an aerial Avista power line that does run down the right-of-way, so if we do vacate the right-of-way, an easement will need to be dedicated to a vista for that line to stay in place. And even if we do grant this vacation and the lot splits are done, development of these lots is still going to be somewhat difficult. Existing utilities up in Homestead and East Street are both set up relatively high in relation to the lots. So storm sewer and sanitary sewer will be somewhat difficult to reach from the lots. And then for a little piece of bookkeeping, this is the letter that was sent to Derek Forsyth. I neglected to put it in the packet. Thank you, Brandy, for noticing that. So this is just a quick copy of the letter that was sent from Mr. Brown, who, this gets confusing because Neil Brown's real estate agent is Jason Brown, who is acting as his agent. So Mr. Brown, on behalf of Mr. Brown, sent Derek Forsyth this letter. Basically explaining that he was required by law to notify him that they'd requested the vacation. Mr. Forsyth, even though has not protested the vacation, never officially sent in a letter saying that he was for the vacation, and therefore a notification was required. And staff's recommendation for the vacation is that, well, first off, it's our understanding that 3 of the 4 adjacent property owners are for the vacation. Our studies have suggested that the extension would provide limited value and transportation network relative to the cost of the construction, and it would be unlikely that the road would ever get built. And staff has no objection to the proposed vacation.
Okay, Bob. Very good. Before I open the public hearing, we'll ask council if they have questions for Bob. And we're going to need to get Maureen and Ann up here as well so we can see them. In case you have questions, Arthur?
Stop sharing. We're there.
There we go. You got him up there now.
Okay, Bob. Relative to the Vista easement for the overhead power lines, what kind of easement would be required there? How wide, and what could and could not be built on that easement?
Well, usually in that case, when you have an easement for an aerial power line, they usually have some sort of a height restriction, and a lot of times a building restriction. So somebody would be able to put a driveway underneath it, or would be able to do landscaping, things like that wouldn't interfere with the line. And usually it would just place an aerial restriction, like 12, 14 feet high, as far as any landscaping or anything.
I
that they
know
would build.
sometimes on some of the lines, they have restrictions on what can be built in there because they have to run a truck in there with a lift or something like that. And
Right.
how does that apply?
Well, it would all depend on how the easement was written. I think that would wind up needing to be a negotiation that would happen between maybe the property owners and Avista. As far as getting truck access in there, as long as that's being utilized for the driveway, I think that could probably work.
Your Honor, if I may.
Gary?
The code requires that, that public utilities shall not be impaired by a vacation. So whatever easements are allowed for public utilities to go over public rights-of-way would continue on this property. So it would not be a private negotiation between the property owner and the franchise utility.
Okay, very good. Art, did
Thank you, Gary.
So just thinking of what degree of potential impediment to development this might represent. So we don't know.
Right.
Okay.
Gina?
I have two things. One is a statement in that I used to live on the cul-de-sac that was actually Howard there, and as it is in an under substandard street, the speed of the traffic going downhill was scary enough with all of the children living in the neighborhood that I would be, even as not a city councilor, very against some sort of improvement of that road in general. But I did have a question. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask about this or not. What will the access to those lots look like? If they do that subdividing, where does the access, how do they get in there?
So the access would come off of East Street, and it would be a private shared driveway on the Paul portion of the vacated right-of-way.
Okay, so not off of Howard at all, it would be off of E. Or not, I'm sorry,
Yeah, off of-
Homestead, not off of.
It would be off of Homestead, not E.
Dan, were
So
those
there
your-
would be some potentially increased traffic on that substandard street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brandy?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. When those lots, those two lots to the east and west of the right-of-way were initially platted, were they platted as single lot? Not
Yeah.
divided?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And then another question I have is, has the Pathways Commission looked at this at all?
I don't know that the Pathways Commission has looked at it. I know it did go to the Transportation Commission. You were at that meeting as well. I don't think the Pathways Commission has looked at it, no.
Another, do you have a feel for how much, I think that the challenges to it being an actual vehicular road are pretty apparent and obvious there. But as a pedestrian transportation or pathway, do you have a feel for how much it's utilized?
Well, the profile that I showed, I know it was probably a little tough to read. On that East Street side, the hillside is running at about a 25%, which is steeper than you would want to do for, say, a bike path. And I think it's probably steeper than you'd want to do for a pedestrian path. That doesn't mean we wouldn't be able to maybe put, some features in it to try to help with that. I know some of the pathways that we've put in some stairs that are difficult to maintain in the winter, but they are useful in the summertime. So as far as there being able to put a pathway in there, it would be possible. It would be difficult, but possible. And I know that some of the comments that we got through email that were in the packet suggest that children do like to use that area as a pathway. I went out and looked at it. From what I saw, I didn't see any. Usually, if you've got a lot of vehicle or a lot of pedestrian traffic in through a grassy area, you see some sort of a path or something like that. I didn't notice that, but it would definitely be able to be used for a pedestrian throughway.
One more about just the pedestrian. There was one comment about there being no sidewalks along Homestead. So I'm just curious about the experience of someone trying to get through, going south from Homestead. How far around do they have to go without a sidewalk?
I wish I could go back in my slides. I would say it's about one city block away, one of our typical interior city blocks, so probably about 300 to 400 feet down to Polk, and then probably about another 300 to 400 feet down to East Street, and then back up. So depending on where you were trying to go, it might be a little bit longer. But if you're trying to come south, and if you're trying to go east or west, once you hit Homestead, you can go either east or west and work your way to East Street, and depending on where you're trying to go. As far as distance goes, I don't know that it would necessarily add too much, but.
And is it accurate that there's no sidewalk along Homestead or that east side of Polk?
Yes.
Okay.
Maureen, I'm gonna go to Maureen, she's had her hand up. Maureen? Volume's not on, Maureen.
Okay, thank you. It is. Okay, so my concern is similar to both Gina's and Brandy's. I live on more near where that is, and my concern is that Homestead is really substandard, and increasing more traffic on that means that at some point, that road's gonna need to get improved and widened to increase the traffic on it, because that's the way people are coming in. And so I'm wondering who's responsible for the payment of needing a sidewalk now and expanding and creating Homestead into a more usable street.
For the most part, the development would be responsible for improving the right-of-way along their frontage of a public right-of-way. And if there was a substantial increase to traffic caused by their development, they may also be required to update roads leading to it. The judgment call on that can be a little difficult. I mean, you're talking about adding 2 principal structures on a road that has, I believe, probably 10 on them. I don't know the count, but
10
just
what?
from memory, 10 other homes already on it. So adding
They have
2
10
more
homes
principal.
on it. Bob, I just want to say that it has 10 homes on it, but then there's the cul-de-sac where Gina used to live,
Yeah.
which has another 5, 6.
So it's probably 12.
7.
You're probably
Yeah,
right
so
on.
maybe a dozen, so the road currently has a dozen homes already on it. And then would there be a substantial increase to traffic on Homestead if you added 2 more principal structures? It's difficult judgment call.
Okay. Gina,
I would,
come to you soon.
I would be completely concerned about the safety of that road. First of all, it is not lit at all. And if you are a pedestrian and a car is coming, you are in the brush on the side of the street to stay away from it. And that is in the best of times. In the winter time and that sort of thing, you try to find another way to do it. You don't want to go on that road. I would be really concerned about this, and I don't think I would love development there unless it included some of those safety features, believe it or not, like a sidewalk and some lighting and widening, and I don't know if that's even possible in that area.
Okay.
I think that was more of a statement, Bob, than a question for you. I'm gonna go to
Yeah,
Sandra.
there was no question.
So I guess my question is, because I take Homestead a lot, or I used to at my old job. That's how I would go home a good portion, at least in the spring and summer, not in the wintertime. And I wouldn't do it after dark because it is too narrow and you can't see. So when you say substantial increase in traffic, what would count as substantial increase in traffic?
Well, that's kind of what I meant as far as it's somewhat of a judgment call.
Sure,
That's-
but do you have a guess on judgment? Like, to me, it'd be like 2 cars, but in your world, it might be 82. So,
I don't have an answer
Okay.
for that. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay, thank you.
Gary,
Your Honor, if I may, we are going to have a public hearing
We
here in
are.
a moment, and it seems we're getting to the debate before we have all the facts before the council.
well, the whole idea was to get some questions because this is a vacation, which is
Yep.
extremely serious for all of us, and so I wanted councilors to be able to weigh in. I'm gonna ask Ann. Ann, do you have any questions before I open up the public hearing?
No, I'm ready to begin the public hearing.
Okay.
I have one more question, and
Okay.
if it should wait, that's fine. But it was just a request for you to expand on, you said a little bit about some development challenges to those.
To the lots.
Yeah, if you could expand on that some, and that could wait, or,
So the lots kind of sit down in a bowl. So what I meant by development challenges were basically around getting sewer to those lots. Both the storm sewer, there is no storm sewer in the area. So in order to get storm sewer to gravity feed from those lots, private easements would most likely be required unless some other measures were taken. And the gravity sewer, the lower gravity sewer is in Homestead, and that Homestead sits quite a bit up from those lots. So depending on how the lot would have to be developed in a way that would allow it to feed from Homestead.
Okay, well, I think without further ado, I'm going to open up the public hearing at 7:33. I want to hear from Jason Brown, who represents Neil Brown, the applicant. So Jason, if you would please come up here and state your name and address, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Jason Brown. I'm a real estate broker here in Moscow, and I do happen to represent Neil Brown, who was the petitioner for this vacation of the right-of-way. And so I just wanted to clarify that there have been no plans, no formal plans have been created to develop those lots. In the intent of Mr. Brown is to be able to utilize the lot that he has, which is currently landlocked. There could potentially be, it sits to the north of his duplex that he owns that faces E Street. And so it's kind of landlocked in between his duplex on E Street and the Forsyth property, which is to the north. And so his intent is to be able to utilize that lot. And currently there is no way to utilize that other than some pretty incredible development and an easement that he would grant to himself or to whomever it is that may want to develop this lot that where they would come off of E Street through the existing driveway that he has to his duplex onto this lot. But because of the grade, the steepness of the lot there, that's hardly feasible. And so the best way in Mr. Brown's mind to be able to utilize that lot for anything would be to have access from Homestead Street. And thus the reason why he's requesting the vacation of the right-of-way. Now, it just so happens that Mr. Frazier also has, currently has he has a duplex that faces E Street, and he has a large lot that extends back and adjoins the Paul property, which is located on the northwest corner of this right-of-way area. And so Mr. Frazier is also interested in being able to utilize that as a potential second lot or separate lot from his existing duplex lot. Again, with no access to that lot, it's unusable. So, but there are no plans in place to develop those lots as residential dwelling lots. Okay? If the vacation of the right-of-way were to go through, then certainly that may be an option that somebody who is interested in acquiring those lots may want to look into. But as Bob mentioned, the development of those lots as residential lots will be challenging and will not be inexpensive due to the grade of the utilities and different things like that. So I wanted to point that out first and foremost. There's been no plans, there's been no design work, there's just been discussion of how we could utilize these pieces, these two different lots, if there was access to them.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jason. Go ahead and sit down. At this time, we'll ask those in favor of this, if they'd like to come up, state their name and their address, and I'll give you 3 minutes to tell us what you think, if you wish. Come on up, and Bob, this has nothing to do with you, so.
I just wanted to make one more.
Okay, come on up.
I just wanted to make one clarification. Part of the restrictions to developing the back halves of those lots, should somebody choose to do so, is the requirement to build the Howard Street. The requirement to build Howard Street would be a requirement to develop those lots. If anybody chose to put a new principal structure on those lots, they would be required to build Howard Street. Vacating Howard Street relieves those lots of that burden, basically, and would essentially leave a flagpole attached to the East Street right-of-way, making them conforming lots. So that was part of the discussion that kind of drove the vacation request.
Okay. I'll take testimony in favor, if somebody would like to come up. I will take testimony against or general testimony at this time. If anybody would like to come up, state their name, address, let us know what's on your mind. We'll give you 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay through the mask? All right, so Derek Forseth, I live at 65 North Moore Street, where the property has been discussed here. So I just wanted to be clear on what we're talking about here, and that was that if it were to be vacated and it were to go through, that it would be split 50-50. So I understand it's a 60-foot right-of-way, we'd be talking about 30 feet. That's one of the reasons that we didn't respond either in favor or opposition, because it didn't specifically say how that would be divided. And I understand that you have some discretion on how that could lay out. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood that's what was on the table, that it was in fact that 30-foot for the pieces that were there. Is that?
That's how we understand. Is that correct, Gary?
Yeah, the draft ordinance calls for center line to be split and then the property to go to the adjacent property owners. That's not required by law, however, the council does have some discretion, so I'm sure that's what Derek's concern is the council going to split it 50-50 down the center line, or do they have something else in mind?
Okay.
And, when it does get vacated and it goes through, just in terms of some of the costs with, would that be surveyed to establish where that boundary line is and who has to bear that cost and those sorts of things, just so we know that, who has to handle that and how that's held. I guess I'd like to have that clarified if we could.
Well, I'm pretty certain it won't be the city. So.
To tell you the truth, I'm not certain how that occurs, Your Honor. We have plat maps and we have layout of streets. My assumption is that the legal description that is in the ordinance lays out how it would be split.
Okay.
So I wouldn't anticipate there would be a separate survey.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if we would be required to, file something, as that property became ours or something to make the adjustment formal. So I guess just kind of some clarification on a couple of those points. Make sure we're on the same page with what the width was, what was being allocated, what was in front of you, survey costs or things like that would be needed to actually do that division and lay that out. I just wanted to understand how that worked out.
Okay.
That was it. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. If a driveway were allowed through that shared access agreement that was shown, just curious what the restrictions are in terms of surfacing. Could it be anything? Would it need to be developed, paved, curbs along those, just to know what would be behind our property in that case?
Well, it would be my guess, and this may be something Bill Belknap will address, but when somebody does, or Bob, but when somebody does a development, those costs occur when the person applies and all those things. Bob, would you want to come up and respond to that? And your time is going to be up, Mr. Forsyth. And usually during a vacation like this, you cannot make a determination who's going to pay for what because nothing's happening at this time. Go ahead, Bob.
So as far as the surfacing requirements go, the approach on Howard Street would be required to meet our current approach standards. So there would, within that right-of-way portion of what you would consider the approach portion would be basically between roughly where the curb line would be and the back of the sidewalk would need to be built to city standards, which would be concrete with kind of a faux sidewalk in there that would be then connected on if sidewalk were ever extended along Homestead. As far as the driveway requirements back behind that, there is a little bit of discretion to the homeowner. Those usually tend to be either concrete or asphalt.
Because that falls within the flagpole lot that you were talking about earlier?
No, it's just the requirements fit more for the right-of-way portion, and then kind of just back behind that, the driveway, there's a little bit of leeway in how a homeowner wants to build their driveway between either pavement or concrete.
But that's up to
or-
the homeowner at their expense, correct?
Yes, that would be, all of that would be built at the homeowner expense, it's not the city.
Here comes Bill Belknap. We'll listen to Bill. Hello, Bill.
Good evening. Just a quick clarification. We do not have a surfacing standard for private driveways, so it could be gravel, it could be asphalt, or it could be concrete. It would need to meet minimum fire code requirements as an all-weather surface, provide access to the lot if there was a lot created. But it does not necessarily need to be concrete or paved. It could be gravel.
Okay, very good. Gina, I'm going to hold off, Gina, but, because I'm going to continue with the public hearing before we ask more
Absolutely.
questions. Are there others that would like to come up and make comment? Please, now is your time. State your name and your address, and I will give you 3 minutes, sir.
My name is Robert Johnson. I live at 614 North Howard. Let's see. In response to the impact on Homestead Street, and in response to Mr. Brown's statement that there are no plans for development, there are 2 lots currently being advertised for sale with a descriptor that says that these lots would be suitable for duplex development. So we're talking about not 2, but 4 residences being accessed through what would become effectively a 30-foot wide strip that would actually belong to, I guess it's the Pauls. So I think those are just things to take into consideration with this proposal. I think as we consider also giving up a piece of city property gratis to someone, we should think about the impact on the community, and that each winter for many years, that hill has been used by children for sledding, and it's used regularly, and it's a great and safe sledding hill because you come down a steep hill, you come into a bowl, and then you go back up again with no risk of going into the street or whatever. So I'll speak for the kids on that one. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
My name is Lyndon Frazier.
Oh, Lyndon.
I live at 620 East E Street, the adjoining property, west of the proposed abandonment. I wanted to argue just a little bit about what he said as far as the city maintaining it, because I've maintained that property of the city's for 27 years. I have mowed it and sprayed the weeds. In fact, I planted it all to grass, because we built that house 27 years ago at 620. And that was just a mess of brush and trees, and I cleared all that, and we built that home there in 1993. The sledding hill is a sledding hill because I had my cousins come in with tractors and equipment, and we sloped all that into that and made a small yard for my back of my home, approximately 30, 40 feet wide, and then a steep bank, and then, flat out there in the back, which we've utilized that property for all these years. My kids are grown now, and so I don't have the use for that backyard that I continue to mow and kill weeds and all of that. So I just wanted to say, I'm the one that made that property, made that hill into what it is. The sledding hill, yes, it does start on the right-of-way, but it ends in my yard. And so for years, and I don't have a problem with it. I mean, we've welcomed kids, but I pick up all their broken sleds and all their coats and jackets and hats and everything after they leave. So anyway, it is there because we built it. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, Lyndon, thank you for your 27 years of service, planting grass and mowing weeds down and killing obnoxious things out there. We appreciate that. Okay, are there others that would like to testify or general? Okay, with that, I'll ask the applicant to come back up if he's got anything. Jason, if you'd please come back up, and if there's anything you could add to, you're welcome to do it this time. And I will give you 3 minutes as well, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jason Brown. So it is true that the property is listed for sale, and that's the whole reason that we're involved in this process, is because we've found significant challenge from the potential buying public to offer these lots and be able to purchase these lots and be able to utilize them in any usable way. And so that's why we've come with this application for vacation of the right-of-way. But again, I want to emphasize that the potential to develop these lots, it's not easy. It's going to be very challenging, and we're not sure if it's even feasible. So I'm not saying that they won't be developed or that they couldn't be developed, because obviously, you know, who knows? Somebody could come in here with all the money and not care and do it. But by granting the vacation of the right-of-way, it certainly makes it a lot more feasible for any prospective or would-be buyer to be able to utilize those lots, because now they can develop them with access as a private driveway. But there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get utilities onto the lot. It's still not going to be easy. So, you know, bottom line is, I think that we have to look at what we think is the highest and best use of a piece of property. And I'm going to read this letter right here from Neil Brown. He's asked me to share this. It says, Honorable Mayor and council members, thank you for considering our request for the vacation of the unused and unimproved North Howard Street between E and Homestead Street. We have owned 2 lots bordering to the east of this street for approximately 18 years. One has a rental duplex and the other is unimproved vacant lot. Without proper and affordable access to our lot, it makes our lot not feasible for use. With the vacation of the street, it will accomplish 2 things: allow us and our neighbor to the west options to better utilize our properties, and remove the unused city property. It will become private to increase the values of the bordering owners. Again, thank you for your consideration for this win-win for the city of Moscow. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing at 7:51. And Gina, you had a question, so I'm going to go to you first.
Bob, would you jump up real quickly and show me the proposed dotted lines, the division and that sort of thing? My question still comes back to a little word that you sort of mumbled in your explanation earlier about sidewalk. Will you show me what the obligation is, if any, for sidewalks for that, should someone choose to develop it, please?
Let's see.
So this roughly shows what the lot lines could potentially look like if the right-of-way were vacated. If the right-of-way was not vacated, let's just to kind of, well, this is probably a better way to describe it. If this lot were sold to somebody else and somebody wanted to build a new principal structure on this lot, city code would require that they improve this portion of the frontage to city standards in order to develop their lot.
Okay.
when I showed the previous, this is roughly the profile of the road that they would need to try to build, which would include retaining walls and all that. So, and what I mean by building it to city standards, that would include sidewalk, it would include curb, it would include pavement, and drainage. So that's essentially one of the large sticking points when it comes to developing this lot right here, is that requirement to build that roadway. Okay. Does that answer your
Brandy's got
question?
a question. Did that answer you?
Yeah,
Okay, Brandy?
thank you.
And Zach, can we get this back off so I can keep an eye on a marine and?
Well, before you
Ann
make
would
that
like
go
to-
away,
Oh,
because
hang on a
I
second.
just wanted to comment on this particular image here.
Yeah.
Just noticing the two lots to the east of
These two?
the brown lot, yeah, but the two over, the next two. Like, they're similar in that the houses are on the south part of the lot with a lot of this undeveloped space beyond, but obviously the other two have no way to have any access or subdivide those and put any other dwellings on them because there is no possibility. So the only reason that potential could exist is because the right-of-way happens to be
Right.
between these two. And this one on the east has that line, so at some point it was divided, but the one on the west was not? Is that what that line means?
So this line work is given to us from the county. So as far as I know, I don't know that this lot split has gone through the city process. I think it was requested through the county, and so the county is showing it. Part of the reason that these lots have not been split is the requirement that a lot connect to public right-of-way.
Yeah.
And so this lot here, because it does have the Howard Street here, could potentially be split. It's just the development of it would be difficult. If the right-of-way were to be vacated, it would essentially turn into a flagpole lot, or could be turned into a flagpole lot. This flagpole, where it touches the East Street right-of-way, would make it a conforming lot by the zoning standards. Even if they didn't utilize this flagpole to access the right-of-way, it still makes it a conforming lot.
Right.
Even if their access does come from a different spot.
So the flagpole part of it makes it conforming, however, you don't get any use out of it. It's because it would no longer be public right-of-way. It would be privately owned,
Right.
and it would just
Right.
be kind of to fulfill the requirement of the lot size.
Right.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for the property owners, but maybe this, I don't know. Maybe that could be utilized. This is easier. This is definitely easier because it isn't as steep, but maybe things could be built to where the flagpole could be utilized.
Okay, Zach, I want to see if Maureen or Ann have got a question out there, because I can't see them, so I want to, Maureen, do you have something? I didn't hear you, Maureen, your volume was off.
It's on. Bill's up there to talk, so I'll listen to him
Okay,
first.
all right.
So I did want to clarify that I know we're kind of looking at a vacation, what could happen, but there will be another step that would happen. Should the council decide to grant the vacation, there would then be a lot division application that would have to be filed for those to be recognized as building lots. And that's typically where we're going to have that development conversation about where access will be gained, or if there are any potential offsite improvements that may be required because of the situation. So I know we are talking about both of them tonight, but there is another step, should the council decide to grant the vacation request, that there will be that lot division conversation coming up in the future as well.
Thank you, Bill. Maureen, I'll go back to you. Would you like to speak? Turn your volume on, Maureen.
Okay, let's get it.
Okay.
My question then comes into, they only have to do a sidewalk on their portion, so that would be where that vacant lot is, and then, say for instance, where Danielle and Derek Forsyth has their property, the answer is it would go to their property and then it would stop, right?
Technically, yes. We have worked with some property owners to connect those sidewalks. And then they're pretty much only required to do their sidewalks and their frontage. As far as getting some sort of development that would get access to some other built road, they would also have to do that, vehicular access. So they would build their portion and then would then have to build some sort of an access to get to either Homestead or
Because my understanding is that from listening to Derek Forsyth, his answer, he'd just push it out and then make a driveway, make a entrance to his property and just take those 30 feet would expand into his property. But that means that the next door, the people who are west of him would have to put the road in and have to agree to put the road in order for that development to go through, right?
Well, I think we're getting mixed up on the requirements for what would happen if the vacation went through versus the requirements if the vacation did not go through. So if currently the way the lot lines are drawn right now, if they wanted to develop the lot that's shown in the county plats, they would have to build the sidewalk, the curb, the asphalt, all that stuff on their half of the road along the frontage of that lot. If the right-of-way got vacated, that requirement would go away, and the only frontage improvements they would really have to make would potentially be sidewalk along the bottom of that flagpole, because that would technically be a frontage improvement of their lot, and the approach that they utilize would have to meet city standards.
One comment, Bob, is, as Bill Belknap had explained, if somebody wants to develop this, it's going to be another application and a process to go through. That's something that council really doesn't have to determine and decide on this evening with this vacation. So I just wanted to make that clear. Gary, did you have a point you wanted to?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind the council that the legal standard under Idaho code is that the council needs to find that the vacation is expedient for the public's interest. And then, once you make that finding, then you're free to vacate the property.
Okay. Brandy?
So, well, I'll speak to that, which is, that we are tasked with determining the vacation of a public right-of-way. We have to determine that it's in the public interest. And hearing the potential challenges to even developing that, if what the argument for how that's in the public interest is infill and increasing the tax base, yet at the same time, we don't even know if anyone's going to come to step up to those challenges with how difficult it may be, it sounds like, to develop those properties. I'm reluctant to take away public right-of-way when there isn't a clear path to it being for the public good.
Okay. Art?
Yeah, to follow up on that, I sat and thought about this for a fair long while, and yeah, the highest and best use of infill in the city is putting in more residences or businesses, generating income, but I don't think necessarily that financial benefit to the city is congruent with the public good in this case. One of our former counselors and planning and zoning chair, Sue Scott, used to talk about ancestral game trails, where people cut across empty lots, especially kids do, and use it for recreational and essentially commuting purposes back and forth. By your math, it's a quarter of a mile to go from the top of Homestead down to the bottom to come around, go back up the other side. It's a clear quarter of a mile as opposed to a few hundred feet. And if you're going to St. Mary's School, no kid is going to take that trek. And so given the entirety of the difficulty of the development here and the lack of what I see as clear benefit to the public, not necessarily to the city, I'm disinclined to approve the vacation.
Gina?
I would echo what my colleagues have said, adding to the discussion the fact that I don't believe that this vacation adds any benefit or adds any, makes any addition to the overall public safety of that street and that area. And I think that anything that would contribute to even a marginal increase in traffic is not safe. And I would not be in favor of vacation for that reason.
Sandra?
I agree completely. As I said earlier, I've used that street a lot for years, and it was always hit and miss. It was scary. It's not the safest street to be on right now. I don't want to see an increase in traffic on there. Even though we don't know what that would be, it would be some increase. I think that's bad for the safety of the kids that live there and the families that live there. And I agree. I don't see anything here that shows benefit to the overall general public of Moscow. It's a beautiful area, and I don't want to have to fix streets and fix sewers down 30 years down the road because we've put this in. I think the way it is right now is the best benefit to our city, and I would like to see it stay how it is.
Ann, we haven't heard from you on this matter. You want to chime in?
I tend to agree. I did have a question. So I was just curious, in terms of talking about additional tax revenue, do we have an estimate on what that would look like?
I couldn't quite understand that, Ann.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yeah, so I did have one question. I don't know if the best person to answer this would be, and I tend to agree with what everyone has said in terms of overall benefit to the public, but I had a question about the additional property tax potentials. I was just curious if we had any kind of estimate on what that would be, because that was mentioned several times as a possible point for why that would be an advantage.
I'll let Gary answer that, Ann.
Yeah, it's really up to the Latah County assessor. The real value in an assessment comes from the improvements on the property. So I don't think you would see any sort of significant increase in tax revenue to the city if this right-of-way were vacated, unless it led to ultimate development of the lots.
Okay. So how would council like to move forward?
Did Maureen go?
Yes, she already spoke.
I would make a motion to deny the vacation request.
Second.
As soon as I asked a question, then it seems like my video cut out. Sorry about that. Mind, I just lost you for the last 20 seconds. Would you mind saying that again, Gary?
Okay.
If I may.
Sure, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I just indicated, Ann, that that decision of what the increased property taxes, taking that public right-of-way back to private property, would be done by the Latah County assessor, but really the major increase in property taxes would come from the ultimate development of the property. So the question would be, if vacating this right-of-way were to stimulate that development, you'd see an increase in property taxes, but otherwise probably not significantly.
Because it's based on the improvements. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, and you might have missed it, but Brandy made a motion to deny the vacation request. It was seconded by Gina. I don't know if you were online with us when that was heard, but so I'm going to start to roll with that, and I will start with Maureen.
Nay.
Ann?
Aye.
Okay. Sandra?
Aye.
Gina?
Aye.
Brandy? Brandy?
Aye.
Art? Aye. Okay.
Excuse me, Bill, just a second, I'm sorry, I meant to say aye. I missed, I didn't track it, it was my answer was inconsistent with my statements tonight, and the answer was aye.
Okay, thank you for correcting that, so I'm sorry, but the vacation is denied, so, thank you, Bob. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will move on to item number 4, which is the farmer's market report. We have Amanda Argona with us this evening. Hello, Amanda.
Thank you, Zach. Oh, we're on Bob's presentation. Can I escape it?
Let's make it funny.
Stop share.
Thank you.
Got it.
Let's hit the Windows key or minimize. Let's exit full screen for a second.
Okay,
And then
sure.
go to PowerPoint. We need to close out of Bob's full screen, so the last one.
This one?
Yep.
Great. It doesn't like that.
Let's open that and then let's open his full screen.
Okay.
Then press its.
Great.
Now we can go.
Okay.
Think about the firefighters.
Wonderful.
How, like, did you see it in the paper? They just went up the
No,
stairs with their
full
tanks
screen
and all their
right.
stuff, and then
This one? Okay. I'm just used to going to a different way. Okay. Good evening, council members and mayor and city staff. So I have the pleasure of giving the Moscow Farmers Market report after a long-awaited start to our season. And Anna Maureen, you can see this okay?
Yes.
Great. Oh darn. Well, I made this while I was at home today, so I apologize for any inconsistencies transferring it to here. But before we get started on the downtown Moscow Farmers Market, I did just want to give some updates about the Motor Inn Moscow Farmers Market, which has been in direct response to COVID-19. This is a prepaid contactless pickup at City Hall, and it takes place on Saturdays. It does happen during the same hours as the Moscow Farmers Market, although it doesn't run as long. We have a 48-hour ordering period through the online storefront, so the store opens tomorrow at 9 a.m. and it will close Thursday at 9 a.m. Right now, we have about 18 agricultural type vendors participating, 7 craft or artisan type vendors, and 1 food type vendor. We hope to see those increase as the season continues. And after 3 weeks of running it, we got our system down, and so now we're going into our 6th week. But what we found, it takes 2 City of Moscow personnel to kind of take the lead on it, and then a maximum of 4 volunteers as helping us run our orders, which generally are 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. are our peak times. So just wanted to provide a couple of photos of how this outfit works. Folks enter on 2nd Street into the City Hall parking lot, where they are greeted by DJ Skaloran, administrative assistant, and they are given a blue or yellow placard onto their windshield. And then they are asked to slowly pull forward and to also, if they're able to, remotely open their trunk. And then that blue or yellow placard indicates to the volunteers which vehicles they're responsible for managing. So we have Team Blue and Team Yellow. You stick to your vehicles, and it helps us move through and keep traffic flowing pretty well. As you can see, we have a pretty intense setup, especially with the growing season upon us. We do anticipate having more table space as starts are kind of coming out of season and more produce is coming into season. But we've got a 4-tent setup, about 8 tables that we have, and then pickers, or the Team Blue and Team Yellow, are going through and collecting the orders that folks have placed with the market. The bottom right photo, Abigail Dow, AmeriCorps member for the Moscow Farmers Market, she is sort of the gatekeeper, ensuring that everyone's orders are in their vehicles before they leave. Sometimes an order or 2 is missed, but we've had a pretty decent track record so far about getting those turned around and back to the people that ordered them. And we actually had some vendors on site in May. So the two folks that you see putting goods into a person's vehicle, those are actually vendors. Just for some numbers, May 16th is at the bottom of the screen, and then we work our way up to the most recent market. So what we found is for every customer, they're placing about 3 orders on average with vendors. And so the orders don't correspond to the customers because they're checking out with each individual vendor, and that money is going directly to the vendor. That's why you see that discrepancy. We have seen a decrease, but we attribute that to weather, to garden season. People probably have their own produce coming on, and then as the downtown market is opening as well. So with the downtown Moscow Farmers Market, in a normal non-COVID-19 year, we have 3 City of Moscow personnel down there. Myself, Zach Ellis, digital media specialist, and then a seasonal employee as well. So we actually have 5 City of Moscow personnel right now, and we actually do require additional volunteers, and those have been coming from the Farmers Market Commission members. We are doing a temporary transition from a community event. Personal statement, the Moscow Farmers Market is near and dear to my heart. I was really excited when I moved to this area in 2013 that there was a farmers market after moving from Missoula. And I do shop it every week with my partner, but we really have focused on making it sort of a outdoor grocery model shopping experience. So while we normally encourage that linger longer aspect, that is not the case this year. And just to provide some context about how many customers we get, in 2018, we did a rapid market assessment. Thanks to Coletta Phelps, a Farmers Market Commission member, she took the lead on that. And we did customer counts in July, August, and September, which were an average of 10,000 customers per shopping day. And then in 2019, we only did customer counts. They were held on, I believe, the 4th Saturday of every month, which actually, the numbers are down. And ironically enough, every day we held a customer count was like the coldest day that month. So that's kind of what we noticed was it may seem like we have less folks, but we actually just happen to be counting on days that were relatively cool for each month. So in preparation to open the downtown Moscow Farmers Market, we surveyed local grocery stores about what they were doing to keep the community safe. We procured hand sanitizer and alcohol wipes for disinfecting devices for vendors, and those have been distributed to vendors in the downtown market. We developed frequently asked questions for vendors and patrons. The patrons FAQ is available on the City of Moscow website under the Farmers Market webpage. You may have to do a bit of digging, but it is there. We've developed signage based on farmers market best practices that we were seeing throughout the country. And then we also have additional direction for opening and operating farmers markets from the North Central Idaho Public Health District per the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. So this is an example. I apologize for the small print. But the guidelines to keep the market safe and open, we have these on oversized A-board prints as well as 8.5 by 11 signage. And our estimates as far as number of people coming to market, it's definitely low. And on the next slide, I want to show you a comparison of where we're kind of at. Just guidelines to keep the market safe and open. We do have an at-risk shopping hour from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. So we ask if you're not in an at-risk population to come to the market after 9:30. We are continuing to limit the number of patrons allowed in the market footprint at a given time. At this time, we are asking folks to enter on 6th Street. If folks utilize a temporary ADA parking in the Jackson Street parking lot, they are permitted to enter through Friendship Square once directed by staff. We haven't implemented our social distancing cues because the weather has been uncooperative. We have chalk spray paint that we'll be using in the downtown area to denote circles where people should be standing that are 6 feet apart. And then we're asking folks to not handle or touch vendor products, wash and sanitize hands frequently, and then using contactless mobile payment application when possible. And we've been working to develop vendor snapshots shared through the Moscow Farmers Market Facebook page, as well as putting together a vendor roster each week and sharing that on the Facebook page. If people don't do Facebook, I'm happy to email it to them directly. But that lets people know who's using what mobile application payments. So here's a comparison of where we're at. In 2019, in May 25 and June 22, you can see our numbers were pretty close to normal, and we're pretty down from that. We do see some traffic being peeled off by the Motor and Moscow Farmers Market, although it's not significant. I'm not sure if this is attributed to folks still not feeling safe enough to come out and come into the market, but we're doing our best to make it as safe as possible for those that are interested. And on the flip side of that, there have been some folks who don't want to come to market because of the restrictions. So I love math, but it's not my strong suit, and I had engineering put together some numbers for me. The overall market area, as adopted by council, which is in the vendor handbook, includes not only the main thoroughfares of Main Street and 5th Street, but actually includes the sidewalks, Friendship Square, and that first bay of the Jackson Street lot. So that overall market area is referring to that entire space. I asked Carrie Edwards, senior engineering technician, to account for the vendor spaces, because we don't want to count those. That's not really where people are lingering. And then what was our remaining open area and how many people could we accommodate in that space if we were given a 12 by 12 area. That's a conservative estimate, given if you're waiting in line, you have 6 feet in front of you and 6 feet behind you and maybe people on either side of you. So that's where we came up with that 12 by 12 area. So you can see, I think total numbers, according to the memo that you all should have received, Main Street, 5th Street, and Friendship Square are 301 people. But again, if you include sidewalks and the first bay of the Jackson Street lot, that's 469. And these are conservative estimates. So just to give some visuals, if you haven't been to the downtown Moscow Farmers Market yet and seen the changes that we've implemented, this is our 6th Street Q Corral, is how we're referring to it internally. So very similar to a TSA line when you're at the airport. And bottom right corner, that photo was taken on the opening day on June 6th. So you can see it's quite in a bit of full sun, and I do have some concerns about that as we progress forward in the season. Addressed in the memo, you'll notice that there was a proposal to discontinue the 6th Street Q Corral by Saturday, July 4th. And I do have concerns about people waiting in line in the heat, in the sun, elderly people, babies, children that are impatient probably. So I have some concerns about keeping this system in place. So I just wanted to provide some really nice examples that I saw. These were provided by commission members and staff, these photos. Woodland Honey, I think, has one of the better setups that I've seen. You can see that he's put tables between him and his customers. He's had some items out for display, and then he bags them up. And then on the right-hand side, you'll notice some blue tarp sheet looking things. And a couple of vendors have just taken pieces of rope and put them across their tent legs, and it just is a nice reminder and visual cue to folks to just take a step back while they're purchasing their goods. Some other examples, all the vendors are required to wear face masks, and we're trying really hard to remind them. I know everyone is experiencing some fatigue, but everyone's in compliance so far. And Deep Roots in that right bottom right photo, you can see most of the product is behind them. But again, we really want to emphasize having the vendors get the products for you. This was on opening day, where we were only limiting 50 patrons in at a time. So you can see social distancing's not really too much of an issue when it's limited to that number of folks. Last weekend, we had upped that to limiting 100 people in the footprint at a given time, but it was a very soggy and wet market. So I imagine a lot of people didn't come out because of the weather. Again, this is opening day. And what we learned from opening day, we want to make sure that people who just want to access the downtown businesses are able to do so. So we are leaving all those natural crosswalks between Main Street and the side streets open and available to the public. So folks just are going to get to their table at Breakfast Club. That's not a problem. They can absolutely cross the market footprint. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Well, Amanda, I'll call on you in a second. Sandra, Amanda, you guys have done a wonderful job. 2020, all of us know, has been a tough year with the COVID-19, and this is a very different footprint on the market this year. It'll change, of course, next year, which will be exciting, but I think everybody has done very, very well, considering the fact that we had to put all these different things, and social distancing is no different than you see in your mayor and councilors up here wearing masks today, and the people in our audience. It's just a different thing that we're in this year, and we're all working together on it. So I think you guys have done a wonderful job, Amanda. And I was there Saturday, and you're right, it was cold and got very wet, and man, it was like winter months or something, but everybody was cheerful and going about and doing well. Sandra, you had a comment.
I do, yeah, and I just want to say thanks. I've been at the market, both times I volunteered at the motor end on the first one, and I'm signed up for more shifts, and I thought that was super smooth. So kudos to you for setting that up. It's not a surprise at all that it's very organized and run very well, but it was easy to work as a volunteer stepping in. So well done there. And then I wandered into the market both times to do some other things with groups, and it was just smooth. And I wanted to echo what Dulcie said. I know that not everybody has been necessarily kind with some of the restrictions put in place, and you guys are so classy about how you handle it, that it's, I mean, you represent the city amazingly well, and I'm really grateful for your patience with people and for just taking some on the shoulder and just walking on, so well done.
Other comments for Amanda?
Are there any comments regarding the memo that was in the packet?
I read through it, it looked good to me.
Okay.
Amanda, thank you so very much for that
Okay,
excellent
thank you.
report, and good job.
Thank you.
Kudos. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item number 5, 2020 Art Walk recommendation. We got Megan Sherry with us this evening, our arts director. So, good evening, Megan.
Good evening. Thank you for having me this evening, Mayor Lambert, members of City Council and city staff. I'm here today to make a recommendation about Art Walk. It's not a recommendation I want to be making, but it's the recommendation that seems wise. I wanted to start tonight by reading the first sentence of the memo that should have been in your packet, and expand a little bit on the ideas in it. Moscow Art Walk is a 16-year tradition. This would be Moscow Art Walk's 16th year in this community, and it is one of the favorite features of summer event programming. I wanted to take a minute to talk about why it's one of the favorite features. It's a time where we all crowd into downtown. We get into the businesses, we talk to each other, we go to the beer gardens, we pack ourselves in like sardines, hang out and drink a beer and listen to the music. This is the quintessential linger longer event. It's what it is intended to do. And so a little bit of history about decision-making and thought processes about this event. In late April, we chose to postpone Art Walk rather than canceling it altogether because it seemed like we would discover more information as we went through the summer. At that point, we felt like we needed more certainty and more information than we had at that time, but really wanted to be able to host an event where the community could to come together. Since that time, what has become obvious is that uncertainty is going to be the dominant theme of 2020. That might be the understatement of the year, but that's really the challenge that we're dealing with. We've got some good guidance from the governor's office. I've had great advice from the MAC. But what's evident is that if we go forward with 2020, Artwalk 2020, there are two risks. One, we will eventually have to cancel it anyway, and two, that we're going to have to alter it beyond recognition. So those are the two risks that I really have looked at in thinking about this recommendation. This is based on a whole host of different points of reference, not the least of which is really generous advice and time from the Moscow Arts Commission, all of whom have weighed in on this topic, and they're darn close to unanimous in their recommendation to cancel as well. Something that came from the governor's office that's really important is the guidance for safe gatherings and public events. In this document, Governor Little gives us some guidance for how to handle events through the different stages of reopening. Now, we're in stage 4 right now. We don't know what the next stage looks like, right? That is another grand uncertainty of this year. What does it look like when we lift restrictions? Does it mean that it's all clear? We don't know. What the guidance does tell us is that those people who are planning events in summer, July, August, and into September, we're all encouraged to plan for every single contingency, to plan to be able to issue refunds, to plan to be able to cancel your event, just in case anything might happen. So I feel like the governor is giving us a real strong warning about being flexible in case things change. The other thing that is really unique to Moscow and Pullman, to the region as a whole, because really we have to look at the region here. It's not just, the virus does not recognize political boundaries. And so for our region as a whole, we've got students coming back in August, and we won't really truly understand the ramifications of that until September. And so that's something that, you know, unfortunately, that times out just about when we would be doing Art Walk, right, on September 25th. The other piece of it is that Moscow Art Walk is a regional event on a normal year. People from, you know, all over the Palouse are coming to visit Moscow Art Walk because it's a great community and a great event to attend. So what that means is that when the governor says, know the level of disease transmission in your local community and the level of transmission in the areas from which your attendees will travel, we can't know what that is until we get right to the line of, you know, that end of August, early September. And so some people have said, and I understand this question, why not just wait? Let's just wait until August, wait until September, and then see what's happening then. The problem is that we've got artists who are preparing exhibitions, we've got performers who are preparing either puppet shows or bands who are playing on stage. And I think if we give them a little bit more time to pivot, that's only right. It takes months to prepare this kind of thing. So that's another really strong point of reference. You know, artists are a really important group that we serve. Another common question is, can we do Art Walk online? And we've thought about a lot of different ways to do it. A couple of things that have been strong points of reference for me, one, the MAC. When I talked to the MAC, a lot of them said, ooh, boy, juice ain't worth the squeeze. It's a lot of work. I just said that into a microphone. It's a lot of work, and people might not pay attention to it anyway. So that's just a point of reference to think about there. And really, the whole core purpose of Art Walk is to get people together downtown to hang out for long periods of time, so they can enjoy
social
each other,
function.
and they can enjoy the entertainment, they can enjoy the art in the host locations. So to take that experience online is close to impossible. That said, there are other things that we're doing to support the arts. It's not like Art Walk is the only game. So we've got other stuff coming up, like Palouse Plein Air, which is a painting competition that is actually far more readily translated into the online space. We've already got it set up to do that. We've got exhibitions restarting in August out here in the 3rd Street Gallery. We've got Mayor's Arts Awards this year. We're just about to launch a new Activities toolbox, art supplies that are going to be available at Amanda's Motor Inn Market. Sea and Main, the public art at Sea and Main is going to be installed. And we'll have new vinyl wraps here, hopefully by the end of the month. So I guess the question is, do we focus on those things that are able to go forward and throw in the towel on this one huge and really important event? The other thing that we've looked at are other events, and actually I feel that I need to address how Art Walk is different from the farmer's market, because with the farmer's market, there's this real imperative to keep that going, to keep that available to the community. Amanda talked about how they're embracing this outdoor grocery model, that it's more essential business. They have eliminated the linger longer elements. People are not being encouraged to hang out. So I think that's one way that it's different. And then I've also been looking at other events around the region to see who's going forward with their stuff and who isn't. Just as a point of reference. So we've got a lot of events. Renaissance Fair canceled here in Moscow. Rendezvous in the park here in Moscow canceled. The Dogwood Festival in Lewiston. Art on the Green in Coeur d'Alene. The festival at Sandpoint canceled for the first time in 38 years. The Lentil Festival recently canceled. That's not to say that all events of this type are canceling. I do see those in other cities. And there are a couple of art walks, both in Sandpoint and in Lewiston, that are going forward. There's an arts and crafts fair up in Sandpoint that is going forward. But when we take all of the elements together, it seems like the wise path is to regretfully cancel and move on to the things we can do next year and look forward to 2021. But with that, I would happily take any questions.
Well, as I stated when Amanda gave her report on the farmer's market, this is a different year for us. There's nobody in this room that likes more people shoulder to shoulder downtown socializing. Oh my God, do I love to drink wine down there and look at art and talk to everybody possible. Everybody knows that, so it just tears me up, but it's a smart thing to do. I mean, it's just one of those years, and we're all battling these things together, and geez, ever since I've been the mayor, I mean, downtown activities have been a big, big, big deal to me, whether it's vandal block parties or whatever. It's just been one of those things that I love to be a part of. I love to see it. I like the people down here, but this year is just a different thing for us with COVID-19. Questions for Brandy, I'm sorry.
Megan, thank you for all of that background and helping us to understand the realities of pulling this off in the art world. Someone brought this up to me and asked, and this is a kind of new business owner who also is someone who has displayed art during the art walk in a business in the past. Could there be a possibility of businesses that wanted to, on their own, feature an artist, submit who that is? There's not an event, but the city could still publish a brochure, and then people can go visit those businesses throughout a couple-month period, but there's just not that event.
Yeah, that's a possible workaround, and and the fact that you bring that up, actually, I'm so glad that you said that, because one thing that I think one of the intentions of Art Walk is to encourage that relationship between businesses and artists, that they can exhibit an artist's work, whether we're putting together a brochure or not, that we really want to say, yeah, please, please function as a gallery. Please do that for the community, for the artists, and obviously there are benefits to the business, but yeah, that could be a workaround. I think the challenge is if there's a shared opening night, that becomes the linger longer congregation, that danger, but yeah, simple brochure.
Yeah, I mean, I would love it if you would, continue your discussions with other staff and see if that's a possibility, but understanding that there couldn't be an opening night, but just more ongoing, and we can include you in the publication that's available at the chamber and the city and all the places that it normally is, to just help support.
Yeah, I can definitely take that to Jen for discussion and, see what's viable there. Mhm.
Art, did you have something?
Oh, just one comment more than a question, but in addition to the 2 points you made about the uncertainty of booking and allowing artists and bands to go out and do something else instead of holding them to it for that time frame, but that and the modification of Art Walk beyond all recognition. Well, the third one is, after the students come back, and you sort of alluded to this, was just the plain risk of more COVID spread, which I think kind of trumps everything else in my mind.
Yep.
Gina? And I'll go to you, Sandra, next.
Well, this is breaking my heart, but if everybody's ready, I'll make a motion. Your Honor, I move that we cancel Art Walk 2020.
Second.
Sorrowfully.
Yeah.
Okay. Motion by Gina, second by Sandra. Sandra, did you have something you want to comment on?
I did just want to comment to say, thanks, as someone who has hung at Art Walk and my mom who hangs at Art Walk. Really the biggest worry we've had this year, we had spots to hang and we're very excited about it and love it. And with the mayor, I love to be downtown and drinking and eating and visiting. But the thought of mingling with people and have them come look at our work and have us talk to them about it, while normally is one of the great joys, it was terrifying and we didn't want to say no. And that's where we were headed. So I'm grateful that we can put this off a year and make it extraordinary again.
With that, this is an action item. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment before I take a roll on the vote here? Okay, we've got a motion by Gene and a second by Sandra to cancel the Art Walk 2020, and I will start the roll. Brandy.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
And Ann. Okay. Thank you very much, Megan, for that wonderful, tough report that you had to give us. So thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item number 6, the Haddock Building Purchase Agreement. Gary Reedner is with us this evening to do the presentation. Gary, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Zach is going to set me up here, so I have no chance of screwing up the presentation. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Your Honor. What you have before you today is a proposal for the city to purchase the Sam Haddock Building, which is the building that is just located to the east across Washington Street from the parking lot of the Moscow Food Co-op and just to the south of the Federal Building and the north of the Chang Seng Restaurant. It's located at the corner of 5th Street and Washington. The proposal is based upon, I'll give you a little bit of history that you recall that just a little over a year ago, we put a general facilities bond election in front of the voters. The bond proceeds that were voted positively on May 19th, 2019 were to be used for purposes of acquisition, construction, remodeling, improvement, or otherwise of a new police station and other public buildings throughout the city. Of course, the major focus of the bond election was the new police facility that had been part of our strategic plan. The original projects for that bond were a new police facility, which is proceeding. Construction will commence in just a couple of weeks. It's located at the intersection of US 95 and Southview, just north of Pape Machinery. The second project that was identified in the bond was the repurposed remodel of the current police facility located at 118 East 4th Street for the use for relocation of community development and engineering offices from the Mann Building, which is located kitty corner across the City Hall parking lot. The reason for that was because the Mann Building was filled to capacity, and as you'll recall, we took some temporary lease space, the old American Insurance Building across 3rd Street from City Hall, because we did not have sufficient space to house our staff. The third project that was identified were minor repairs to the Mann Building. As you recall, there were some recalking that needed to be done. There was some water intrusion through some of the brick mortar and the roof, and some other minor repairs. It wouldn't have to be much of a remodel on there. The idea was to move information systems back from where they're currently located in the Egan Youth Center back downtown where most of their business is. Additionally, we have no secure storage of permanent records in City Hall. All of our permanent records are stored either digitally in a makeshift vault downstairs, excuse me, or in a section of the basement. As you know, the basement of City Hall is not exactly water-free at certain times of the year, so we would like to get some storage for those permanent records, and that was one of the additional uses for the Mann Building. This is a slide that we took from our bond election. As you can see, this is the current police facility, was owned by J&J Glass. I always like to point out that City of Moscow pickup vintage 1962 Dodge sitting there. We purchased the building in 1960. In 1970, it was used as City Hall, and then in the 1990s, the police took over the entire building after about 5 or 6 years when there were different city departments ranging from the legal department to community development to finance were over there at any one time. And then about 1993, 94 is when we made it over here to City Hall, and it was expanded use exclusively as a police station. That's what the current 4th Street facility looks like. It's all familiar. That is a rock aggregate facade on the building. There is brick underneath that, which we would like to have exposed someday, but if this proposal goes through, the city won't be doing that. Okay, the 4th Street facility, again, it was a facility that is owned by the city. It was originally constructed for business and industrial use. It was a creamery at one time, it was a glass shop at one time. It's got about 8,400 square feet, Bill, if I recall correctly. 84 square feet on one floor. It's been extensively remodeled for use as a police station. When I first came to the city in 1992, except for the utilities and parks and recreation, all city facilities were located in that building. We had about 88 employees at the time, and walls were taken down and put up with impunity. There are a few bearing walls in there, but everything else I can guarantee you was probably taken down, punched through, remodeled several times in my time at the city. There's no off-street parking. It's on a cul-de-sac, the dead end of 5th Street East, which makes it a nice, slow street. However, it also makes it very problematic for use as a police station, and also as we will locate or plan to locate our community development and engineering offices there that have also extensive use with the public, visiting contractors and such, people requiring permits. And we also have several inspection vehicles that are also, you can see them out the back of City Hall when they use them, community development and engineers are housed in the Mann Building at this point. It will require extensive remodeling for return to use as a general office building. If you've been in the police station, I know you all have in advance of the election last year, it is a maze in there. There are, the detectives' offices, for instance, have no windows to the outdoors. There are various offices and conference rooms that have no windows at all, very limited natural light. There is only one ADA access into the facility, that is off of the Washington Street east side. Again, that makes it problematic as well. One of the things that we had looked at was redesigning the front entrance of the building to allow ADA access through there, a fairly expensive and complicated process. And lastly, it is located inside what we call the Main Street Downtown Commercial District, which is essentially everything that lies within the North Couplet and the South Couplet. So that's typically where your downtown activities occur, central business all the way. So it is a property that is probably more useful as a commercial property than as a governmental property. Current 4th Street facility, the estimated cost of repurpose and remodel in the bond was about $1.5 million. Of the bond proceeds, after we have had to purchase property for the police station, and of course, as you know, construction costs have increased, we have about $641,000 left from the bond that is not earmarked for the police station itself. We do have a balance that we've been saving up in general fund capital accumulation for the last several years, so we would finance the balance of that project out of that. So that is how we would do the 4th Street facility if it proceeds. The Haddock building, on the other hand, which is currently owned by Greteman Medical Park LLC, we were approached to determine whether or not the city had any interest in the property. Naturally, we looked at it as an alternative to the 4th Street project, and for these reasons. It was constructed in 1985 for use as an office building. We've been able to determine exactly when the 4th Street facility was constructed, and it was not constructed as an office building. It was constructed as a commercial industrial building. The Haddock building has 7,500 square feet of office space as opposed to approximately 8,400 feet of square feet in the 4th Street facilities. It also has 1,400 square feet of storage space in a partial basement, which is of particular interest to the engineers and the building staff, because they have all of we have to keep commercial building plans in forever, so we need a place to store those. It's got 15 off-street parking spaces, which is something that 4th Street cannot boast. Convenient access for customers and the public off-street. It would take less extensive renovations. Staff has toured the building, done a preliminary assessment, and it appears that there are very few bearing walls. Most of the walls are being supported by the outside structure, so offices could be moved and renovated fairly inexpensively. Increased natural light. If you've been in the building, it does have a lot of windows. Natural light is something that adds to employee morale. It has increased utility as far as energy use, so on and so forth. So that's of value as well. And lastly, it's a close proximity, but it is outside of that Main Street Downtown Commercial District. So you can cross the street and be in that commercial district, but with a state highway northbound going in front of it, it's not as accessible as those downtown businesses. Here's some pictures. This is a southeast view of the building. You're all familiar with it. This is the building east from the sidewalk adjacent to the Moscow Food Co-op parking lot. So as you can see, quite a bit of glass. Nice brick building. You can see off to the side over here where the parking is. The parking also goes around the back of the building. 15 parking spaces, as I indicated. We have inspection and engineering vehicles that are always on the move whenever inspection or construction season is going on. So on the 4th Street facility, we would have to take significant on-street parking up to park those inspection vehicles or have them housed in the parking lot just to the east of City Hall, which would require the inspectors to walk a block and a half to get to their vehicles, which isn't very efficient as well. The Haddock Building, the purchase price we've negotiated with Greteman Medical Center is $875,000. We've estimated the remodel costs at $425,000 compared to the, $1.3 million in total estimate compared to the $1.5 million for the 4th Street facility. Additional consideration is as soon as the police department moves from the 4th Street facility to their new facility on US 95 and Southview, the city council could elect to sell the current police station and return the property to a non-governmental use, and the proceeds of that sale could be used to partially offset the cost of renovation of the Haddock Building, bringing the actual cost of purchase and remodel well below the $1.3 million estimate. So the proposal staff is bringing to you tonight is to enter into a real estate purchase and sale agreement with Greteman Medical Park LLC for the purchase of the Haddock Building for $875,000. As you can see in the contract that was included in your packet, we've negotiated a 90-day due diligence period. There will be a $5,000 earnest money paid at the same time. That $5,000 will go toward the purchase price. And if for any reason the due diligence does not yield a functioning building that we believe we can use, then that $5,000 will be returned to the city. Either at the end of that due diligence period, which ends, I believe, September 1st, or earlier, if the city conducts its due diligence and is satisfied that it is come as advertised and we can utilize it, we would close on the property and then begin plans to renovate it for use by community development and engineering. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Okay, we want to be able to get the vision of both Maureen and Ann on here as well, but I'll start the questioning with Art. He had his hand up.
Yeah, about how many square feet is the man building?
4,000.
Wow, big diff. And assuming that we go ahead and buy the Haddock Building, is the implication there that we could start remodeling on that as soon as we close on it and perhaps have that done as sooner than the police station?
Yeah, it actually fits better into our plans. We had, as you remember, a staggered schedule. We couldn't start remodeling the 4th Street building till the police were out and in their facility. If this happened, we could, and we'd have to go in and we'd have to use our capital improvement accumulation, general fund capital improvement. But we would make plans to start remodel as soon as we can finance that. It is included in the 2021 FY budget proposal. But the good thing is we could move earlier on moving community development and engineering into that building. Would also house grants, by the way. And then we could begin, we've also budgeted partial repair of the man building. The man building was something that we included in the bond. We can use maintenance funds to do that. It will just take a longer time to do it. But yes, it would move us up significantly. And there's an opportunity, actually, that both of those facilities could be repurposed and be occupied before the police station is finished up next year.
Brandy?
If that could get going more quickly, could we get out of that lease as soon as we can move people out?
We've had some discussions with the landlord, and we would pursue those discussions, but there's an opportunity to do that, yes.
So that would be additional savings.
Absolutely.
That's not worked into what you've shown us tonight.
Others? Art?
Well, I'd make a motion to approve the purchase and sale agreement to purchase the Haddock Building from Greteman Medical Park LLC in the amount of $875,000.
Second?
Sandra, was that you?
It was.
Okay, I thought it was. And before I take a roll on this, this of course this is not a public hearing, but it is a public meeting or it's an action item. Is there anybody from the public that'd like to comment on this? Okay, seeing none come forward, I will go ahead and start a roll, and I will start up there with you, Ann. Ann, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just thinking about it. I understand the potential for cost savings, and I guess I'm just a little hesitant, even understanding all those different factors in terms of property acquisition at a time when I know that we are, as a community, I think a lot of people are facing financial hardship, and it's just something I'm considering.
It sounds like maybe you want to have a little discussion, Anne, or, I don't know.
Yeah,
Sure.
Because I'd be happy to say a little something too, that, you know.
I think, go ahead. Or
I mean,
yeah.
my thoughts about it is, I think it's kind of, it feels like a gift in a way to have the opportunity to have, when we weren't even looking, a building that's in better shape, that's more suited for the needs for many different reasons, that will free up that precious downtown parking so that it won't be used by the city of Moscow, and that is cost savings. I mean, we're committed to spending that 1.5 million on renovating that building, and if we can do it for less and end up with a better property that's a little off of Main Street. You know, it took me a little while of kind of processing all of it, but that's what it really comes down to, is why would we spend more for a building that is not as good, basically, in its simplest terms. So that's my reason that I support the purchase.
Okay. Thank you, Brandy.
Excuse me.
Maureen?
And I have to say, I had those same thoughts when I first read it. And my concern is that we're gonna have to do something anyways. So why not do something that betters the downtown area, is less expensive for us, and provides more light and parking for the city employees. And so I guess I am in favor of it because of that. Although when the first time I read it and the first time I heard of it, I did have those concerns. And it seems to me that saving money and having a better space, we're gonna spend the money anyways.
Okay, other discussion with,
Well, just to say that, don't forget, we're going to sell off that 4th Street building to commercial use and recoup some of those costs already, and reduce the price of the acquisition and renovation of the Haddock building by that much more.
and open up a little more parking.
Right.
But that's contingent on our ability to sell that building for a price that we would hope to achieve. Which, I guess in this market, I don't know, I have some hesitations about, some reservations.
Okay, well, with that, Ann, I'm still gonna ask, I need either yes or no from you.
I'm a nay.
Okay, Maureen,
Aye.
Brandy,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
and Art.
Aye.
Okay, we have 5 in favor, 1 opposed, which is Ann. Thank you very much, and with that, Gary, we will move on to item number 7, Whitcomb update.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm here tonight to report on what is happening with Whitcomb. Whitcomb is the consolidated dispatch service that is, the city has been contracted with since 2004 by way of history. And the city used to have its own dispatch center located in the 4th Street Police Facility. We, in fact, again, hearkening back to my first year with the city, we purchased some new Motorola equipment at a cost of almost $1 million, if I recall right. And we had, I believe, 9 dispatchers on staff, as well as administration and support staff. Significant cost in a different division of the police department at the time. We went through and utilized that dispatch center for about the next 13 years, 12 or 13 years. During that period of time, we explored joint dispatch with Latah County on 2 different occasions, got to the point where we hired consultants to come in and provide some opportunities. At that time, it was determined that that was not the way that we were going to go. Then we went back to district court to get judicial confirmation when we needed to replace our equipment in our dispatch center operated by the MPD. Judge Stegner at the time said this is not an ordinary and necessary expense, and it's not a mandate by the state or federal government, so put it out to vote. That time, the city council started looking for alternatives. For a brief time, started talking to Latah County. Again, that yielded no fruit. And at that time, we were approached by Whitcomb, which was a joint venture of Whitman County, the city of Pullman, and Washington State University. It was an independent board that operated the dispatch. They had additional capacity. The state of Washington at the time was giving fairly significant funding for emergency communications. It was just after 9/11. So at that time, consolidated communications were a really big issue. So they had excess capacity, and regional dispatch centers at the time were actually going out and seeing if they could provide services to more remote locations. We're not very much more remote than Pullman, and certainly not of Colfax. However, we were in a different jurisdiction. At that time, we negotiated a deal with Whitcomb for about $380,000, I believe, or $390,000 in 2004 to provide that dispatch service. Dispatch isn't only dispatchers sitting at consoles. It is the cost of the consoles. It is also maintenance of the PSAP, which is the consolidated address system by which something comes in. The CAD system says where the call is coming from, and that way they're able, when they talk about computer-aided dispatch, that whole maintenance of that address list has to be kept up consistently. That was also a huge cost of our own dispatch center. At any rate, we contracted with Whitcomb at the time. Whitcomb also at that time was putting out feelers to Asotin County, and Asotin County at that time also entered into an agreement to become contract members of Whitcomb. We were granted an ex officio position on the board. These are typically 3 to 5 year contracts. Again, we started in 2004. We had an ex officio membership on the board. I served in that capacity early on for about 10 years. Later on, we were offered a position. We renewed the contract on 4 different occasions. We were offered a voting position on the board during the last contract. It was about 2015 when that occurred. And that I served on the board, and that has been delegated to the police chief, and he serves on the Whitcomb board at this time. However, since that time, Whitcomb has encountered some management issues and now is operating at a deficit. So they have not got enough revenues in order to keep their expenses even. So, and part of that is because of the structure of Whitcomb. Both Asotin County and the city of Moscow pay an amount based upon our original contracts plus escalators that have increased the cost. Currently, I believe we're paying about $560,000 a year. Asotin County is doing the same. During that same time, the 3 original members of Whitcomb have been able to offset their costs with state grants, so on and so forth. So as it appears now, those grants and other things have not kept pace. They've had to make some salary adjustments at Whitcomb, and they've had a change in management twice over the past 2 years. So at any rate, at this point, they are, their shortfall is going to be around $370,000 if my calculations or my mind doesn't fail me. During that time, you approved Roger Lanier, our captain, the captain of our patrol division, operations division, who has experience as a dispatch manager. We have loaned him, if you will, to Whitcomb for a short period of time. During that time, he's done an admirable job of assessing the facility, assessing the dynamics over there, and has worked with the financial officers from each of the entities to try and determine if there is a sustainable funding model going forward. That funding model will include increases to all members of Whitcom, but especially to the 3 original members whose amounts have not kept pace with the increases for the contracted members. So with that, we would have an increase in the next year to, I believe it is, $641,000, so an increase of about $60,000. However, the increase to the other entities is over $100,000. So the idea is to get that evened out so that it is split out in a fairly even situation. There are like services, in-kind services provided to Whitcom by Washington State University and the City of Pullman. We put a value on those services of about, I believe it is 2.5%. So the way that the funding model rolls out at this point is the 3 original members of Whitcom, now it will just be called Whitman County because it's all part of Whitman County, is at 57.5% of the operating costs of Whitcom. The 2 contract entities, Asotin County and the City of Moscow, would contribute 21.25% of the costs of Whitcom as well. So that is a sustainable model going forward. During that discussion, we are also petitioning Whitcom to add an additional board seat to both Asotin County and the City of Moscow. It's becoming more and more like a partnership. Whitcom was formed as a interlocal agreement pursuant to the revised Code of Washington. Obviously, we're an Idaho entity and cannot be part of that. So we are partners to the local intergovernmental agreement, if you will. One of the things that we talked about during the discussion was the need for a contract that was long enough that we could make plans. Instead of a 3-year contract, we talked about having a 5-year agreement. In addition, because we wanted to make sure that if there were increases, whether 3% inflationary increases, whatever they are, that the CFOs of each organization or a representative of the finance of each organization would meet every year before budget time, determine what it costs to keep the operation afloat, and determine what any incremental increase to be assessed to each of the partners, including the contract partners and the interlocal agreement partners, would have for that upcoming year. So with that, I don't have a contract for you tonight. We just met a week ago today and discussed this, and all of the other entities need to go back to their governing boards as well. However, they're having some issues with retaining dispatchers at Whitcom, and part of that, one of the ideas is if we can get our agreement done. Our contract expires December 31st. We will have to have something in place to replace that. Asotin County has no contract at this time. Their contract has already expired, although they are continuing to operate as if they did have a contract in place. But the idea is to get some sustainable plan going forward, which will encourage dispatchers to continue to work at Whitcom. So with that, and I will tell you the opportunity cost of operating a dispatch center, it is still a much better deal than the City of Moscow operating their own dispatch center, other than the increase in personnel, dispatchers, administration. You also have to have a facility that you built for the dispatch, and the equipment for dispatch and the maintenance of that PSAP is a significant amount of money. Every one of the partners understands that we are better served by working together than by each of us striking out on our own. So with that, I'd stand for any questions. What I'm looking for tonight is just direction that that is something that the council, if you've got questions, I'm here to answer them, but we will be bringing a contract forward after we have solidified negotiations with the Whitcom board, and then we'll bring that back to council for your consideration and approval.
Comments for Gary? This is just a report update, Brandy.
One question, so why is there trouble retaining the dispatchers, and what is the hope that will, that will change in the future?
Well, amazingly enough, dispatchers aren't paid as well as you would think. That's a big deal. They have 24-hour jobs, that's shift work. The stress of a dispatcher, as Chief Fry will tell you, there is an incredible amount of stress on a dispatcher. And if you don't have a positive working environment, people decide, I will go try something else. That dwindles the number of dispatchers. You still have to cover shifts. They've had some horrendous shifts over there to cover shortfalls. So they want to get back, and Roger, I think, has engineered a very good plan of, they've just implemented a, it's significant, but it's not significant, salary adjustments. But his plan is if we can get forward on solid footing in a sustainable model, that it will invite the ones who are there to stay and aid in recruiting and bringing people. So I think it's just a cycle they're on right now.
Okay. Maureen, you or Ann have anything for Gary on this? Okay.
No.
Sandra?
So Gary, you said you've been involved with them for over 10 years, correct? Is that?
Almost since the inception.
Okay, so it seems like they've often cycled through having really hard times keeping dispatchers. I don't know if there's an answer to this, but I mean, it's more than just working too many hours, because there have been times where there have been a lot of dispatchers there and they just quit. And so are there opportunities, are they putting them together for better training for supervisors to make it a more hospitable working environment?
Yeah, the only time that we've had, that I can recall, that we've had the number of dispatchers that were down right now was only one time in the last, since I've been involved, the last 16 years. But management has something to do with it. Patty Von Bargen, Patty Kelly, who was a longtime executive director of Whitcomb, left. And then they've had interim management since then. And now Roger's doing it. They're interviewing for a new executive director. And there seems to be, the stability has been palpable almost. I mean, people are thinking like, hey, we're getting taken seriously. And it's been refreshing to sit down with the other members of Whitcomb and talk about, okay, what's this looking like going forward? We need to put something sustainable so that we can all benefit from it. And I've been very pleased with the partners.
Thanks.
Okay, well, no more questions for Gary. We'll go move on to the COVID-19 report, Gary.
Thank you, Your Honor. We are now in stage 4 of the governor's Idaho Rebounds Plan, which means, as you can look out in the gallery today, everybody is social distancing 6 feet apart in every direction. We're wearing masks. Gatherings of more than 50 people are allowed as long as social distancing is adhered to. There has been, in certain parts of the state, the governor gave a press conference last week where he said there are several counties that were experiencing some degree of community spread. That Latah County is not one of those counties, thank goodness, and I don't believe we have any in District 2, but it is something that he's very cautious about, making sure that people continue to practice good hygiene and social distancing. That being said, as far as the city goes, we are very close to back to normal operations. Our city facilities are open with very few exceptions. We are continuing, because we are maintaining a mask protocol in public facilities at this point. Excuse me. So City Hall, the west and south entrances remain locked. The east entrance, the ADA accessible entrance, you come in there, there is, well, the little mask stand is out in front of our council chambers tonight. But the idea is to continue to try and protect the public and protect our employees from being exposed. Tonight is our first in-person city council meeting since March. So you remember we had a couple of abortive Skype meetings where we had some people at home, some people here, and the feedback was not very good, but we've got that mastered thanks to Zach. So these meetings are becoming smoother and smoother. July 13th, we will resume city council committee meetings. So that will be the second Monday in July. And commission meetings, which we had originally weren't going to have those reconvene until August. Had great responses from commissions wanting to meet and get back to work. So as of today, liaisons are talking to their board chairs and seeing when they want to meet. And P&Z met last week. I think Sustainable Environment is meeting this week. The reason that they are is because they are working on the 5G discussion, and we didn't want to delay that because there will be people coming to town wanting to deploy 5G, and we want to make sure that we're ready for that. Just running through, things are going well so far. Last council meeting, we talked about a program where expansion of sidewalk cafes was going to be explored. Staff's done a great job. I got to compliment Lori Hopkins, Tyler Palmer, Steve Schulte, Amanda Argona, and a host of others, Mia Bautista, our city attorney, who came up with really good policies. And so far, we have, I believe, 5 permits that are issued, no, 3 permits issued so far. 5 applications are pending at this point, and we think we will get at least 6 more. So things are rolling fairly well. People have been good to work with, and we hope we can continue to allow that expansion and allow people to assist more in the recovery. Other than that, the big news that we're talking about right now is you've read something in the paper, I'm sure, or press releases from the governor's office or dispatches from AIC, Association of Idaho Cities, regarding the allocation for tax relief. As you will recall, the federal government gave $1.25 billion of CARES Act funding to the state of Idaho. Out of that, approximately $49 million was allocated for cities based on population for reimbursement of COVID-related expenses. And City of Moscow's share of that $49 million was $887,000. So pretty strict guidelines on what you can use that for. The Treasury issued regulations. There's a website called Transparent Idaho, which also assists with that. We immediately put Elisa Anderson, our grants person, on that. She's helped immensely with that. So we are currently accounting for our time, accounting for any direct expenses fighting COVID, and those will be reimbursed hopefully through that original $887,000. About a week and a half ago, we were informed that the governor's office was considering the Coronavirus Finance Advisory Committee, which is chaired by Alex Adams, who is with the Division of Financial Management, had proposed $200 million of additional assistance to cities and counties. That additional assistance was to come in the form of property tax relief, but only in a roundabout way. What would happen is the funding would be allocated again based on population. A certain amount would be made available to individual cities. It floats a little bit because it depends on how many people, how many cities and counties are participating. But those funds could be used specifically for reimbursing for the salaries or employment expenses of public health and public safety employees. The Treasury regulations are really pretty forgiving, if you will, for accounting for those. They use terms like for administrative convenience and expediency. They're going to presume that all public health folks, all fire people, all police people are pursuing activities that are minimizing the COVID-19. So there are a lot of things we're working out. One of the criteria is that the only way you can access those funds is to reduce property taxes by a like amount, which is, I mean, it's a great thing on its face. It brings property tax relief back to the property owners of Idaho, the taxpayers, but there are lots of complications about what it actually means. We've been working with, in fact, I just sent an email today to Christine Nauman up at the Latah County Assessor's Office to try and determine what Latah County has heard about this. They would like to know what the city's going to do, and I just said, right now, we're not sure because we haven't been given sufficient information. There was some guidance that was issued last week through the Association of Idaho Cities. Elisa and I have gone through that with a fine-tooth comb. It sets out the process by which you can be reimbursed, but there are a lot of other issues such as how does this, what does this mean for future tax years, and what does it do to the future ability of the city to continue? So those are things we're looking into. It is something that certainly if there is a way to provide tax relief to the taxpayers, council's going to want to do that. No doubt about it. But we are trying desperately to get enough information so that we can provide it to you and you can make an informed decision. With that, things are going well as far as the city's personal COVID recovery.
Gina, you got a question?
Yeah, I do. On that $887,000 that we got, and then I'm assuming that the other Latah County communities also received?
We haven't received it yet. We have got to,
It's a reimbursement.
it's a reimbursement based on what expenses that we've accrued from the start of this thing to the end of this year.
Okay.
Every city and county in Idaho was given a certain amount based on population.
Okay, so there could potentially be reimbursements coming from all the other the cities within our county as well?
Yes.
Okay, have they released the last of the requirements or the rules about personnel yet?
The Treasury regulations are fairly clear on it, but as you know, you're dealing with, the mayor knows better than I believe, $2.3 trillion of federal aid that was come up with and issued within a month.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. And there are interpretations. For instance, okay, you've got officers out on the street, it's going to be presumed that their salaries can be reimbursed. What about the administrative sergeant back at or the police chief, or, you know, you can see how far this would go.
Indeed.
So what we're looking for is additional guidance. We were led to believe there would be another guidance document issued today. We did not see it. I checked with Elisa just before 5. She had not seen it either. So we will continue to monitor it. The thing about this $200 million is the timeline is fairly succinct. You need to give notice that you're going to pursue it, how much you're going to pursue it, and then when you have to make the decision is when you authorize us to fill out the L2, which is the guidance document to the county that informs them what they're to levy. Once that levy goes in, it's in for the following year. So once that happens, then that kind of locks you in, and then the state would send you your check in November or December. So again, we're still talking about a program that we're still trying to find out what the sideboards are.
Gina, that other money, that $887,000, we do know that we cannot take any revenue loss type of things with that. It has got to be a labor thing or something that's a cost factor, but not revenue that has been lost by the cities.
Indeed. I know that in my day job, when the small cities are facing the potential for this cash and this reimbursement moment, there were still some questions they had, and they were very interested in what we as a community were doing, and they see us kind of as the leaders. So as we do find out, if you would trickle that down to your organization that does economic development, I know that they would appreciate that.
We will be happy
Because that
to.
is-
I know that,
Yeah.
that all of my counterparts across the state have the same answer, or same question.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, other questions for Gary?
Wasn't it like the end of July that we need to make a decision?
That is when we give notice to the state that we want to take advantage of it. And again, it floats a little bit because it all depends who's taking advantage of it. If some city doesn't want in, then there's still $200 million it's going to be, at least we're being led to believe, is going to be divvied up among the rest of the ones who do want to take it.
Seems to me like it's the direction we'll probably end up going, Brandy, or should go, but there's more discussion that's gonna happen with it before we make that decision.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Anything else anybody wants to add before I ask for an adjournment? How about a motion to adjourn, Ed?
Let's go.
Arthur made that. Anybody want to second it?
Second, third.
Okay, we got a motion by Art, a second by Gene, and we'll do just a voice yell on this. Everybody in favor to adjourn, say aye, aye. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're out of here at 9:28.